I never planned for it to happen that way. Standing at my brother's wedding reception, enduring my father's whispered disappointment in my ear. Maybe someday we'll have something of yours to celebrate, Olivia. The champagne in my hand trembled as I forced a smile. But when the grand doors of the ballroom swung open and the event coordinator announced, Mr. Gabriel Chen, CEO of Horizon Dynamics, every head turned, including my parents. And when Gabriel walked straight to me, kissed my cheek and slipped his arm around my waist, my father's champagne flute crashed to the floor. That's when I realized they had no idea the mystery man I'd been dating for 8 months was the same tech genius whose company had just made headlines for a $4.8 billion acquisition and whose foundation had anonymously funded my brother's perfect wedding venue. Have you ever been labeled the disappointment until one moment changed everything? This isn't about revenge or proving people wrong. It's about finding your worth in a world that's determined to misunderstand you. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Olivia Mercer, and for 28 years, I've been the family's cautionary tale, the one whose choices were questioned at every holiday dinner, the sister who took the unconventional path, my mother's gentle phrasing, or wasted her potential, my father's blunt assessment. I was sitting in my modest Portland apartment 3 weeks before my brother Tyler's wedding when I received the call that would set everything in motion. The early June sunlight streamed through my bay windows, illuminating the scattered papers on my desk, grant proposals, budget spreadsheets, and the frameworks for a new literacy program I was developing for underserved communities. My small nonprofit, ReachLit, was only 2 years old, but we'd already established reading programs in 17 schools across Oregon. It wasn't glamorous work, and it certainly wasn't making me rich, but every time I saw a child discover the magic of reading, I knew I'd made the right choice walking away from corporate law. My family had never understood. My father, Richard Mercer, senior partner at Mercer, Williams and Hayes, had mapped out my entire career trajectory before I'd even started law school. My mother, Diana, the perfect corporate wife and charity board member, had already been planning which society events would showcase her successful daughter. And my brother, Tyler, 2 years younger but somehow always steps ahead in our parents' eyes, had followed the blueprint perfectly. Prestigious business school, strategic marriage to Emma, daughter of a state senator, and a fast-tracked position at a financial firm. I'd disappointed them all by leaving my associate position at a top Portland law firm after just 8 months to start ReachLit, throwing away a 6-figure salary for storybooks. My father had scoffed. He'd stopped mentioning me to his colleagues after that. My phone buzzed on my desk, my mother's name flashing on the screen. I took a deep breath before answering. "Olivia, darling," her voice chirped with practiced cheer. "I just wanted to confirm you received the final wedding schedule. The rehearsal? Dinner is on the 24th, and we absolutely need you there by 5 for family photos." "I received it, Mom. I'll be there," I replied, pushing aside a funding proposal I'd been working on all morning. "Wonderful. And you'll be coming alone?" The RSVP card you sent back was a bit unclear. I hesitated. Gabriel and I had been dating for 8 months, but I'd kept him separate from my family intentionally. He understood me in a way they never had, and I wasn't ready to subject him to their subtle dismissals and probing questions. Gabriel Chen wasn't just any boyfriend. At 34, he was the founder and CEO of Horizon Dynamics, a tech company specializing in educational software and accessibility tools. We'd met at an education conference where I was speaking about literacy gaps in urban schools. He'd approached me afterward, not with the standard networking small talk, but with thoughtful questions about implementation challenges and scalability. What had started as a professional connection over coffee had gradually evolved into something deeper. Gabriel saw value in my work when my own family dismissed it as charity rather than career. He understood the purpose that drove me because the same desire to make education accessible had fueled his own path. Actually, I found myself saying before I could reconsider, I will be bringing someone. The silence on the other end lasted just a beat too long. Oh, well, that's unexpected. Anyone we know? His name is Gabriel. We've been seeing each other for a while now. How lovely, she said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. What does he do? He works in educational technology, I replied, intentionally vague. I wasn't ready to explain Gabriel's success, knowing it would only lead to more questions about why I wasn't pursuing something similarly lucrative. I see, she said, in a way that made it clear she was already forming judgments. Well, we'll look forward to meeting him. I should go. Your father's waiting to take me to lunch with the Prestons. Did you know their daughter just made junior partner at Sanderson & Burke? Only 31. Remarkable. The subtle dig wasn't lost on me. Give Dad my best, I said, ignoring the bait. After we hung up, I stared at my phone, wondering if I'd made a mistake. Gabriel and I had discussed meeting each other's families, but I'd been hesitant. His parents were warm, encouraging people who had embraced me immediately. Mine were complicated. I texted Gabriel. Just told my mom you're coming to Tyler's wedding. Still time to back out. His response came quickly. Not a chance. I've been curious about these people who failed to appreciate how extraordinary you are. I smiled, feeling that familiar warmth spread through me. That evening over dinner at my apartment, I explained my family dynamics to Gabriel more thoroughly than I ever had before. They've never understood why I left law, I said, pushing pasta around my plate. My dad had my whole future mapped out. Law, review, federal clerkship, junior partner by 35, senior partner by 40. When I walked away, it was like I'd personally betrayed him. Gabriel listened thoughtfully, as he always did. What was the final straw that made you leave? I set down my fork, remembering the moment with perfect clarity. I was working on a pro bono case for a community center that was being forced out by developers. I spent weeks on it, building what I thought was a solid case. When I presented it to the partner supervising me, he said, "Nice work, but don't get too invested. We're also representing the developer's parent company on another matter." I shook my head. The center lost their space. A month later, I handed in my resignation. And started Reachlit, Gabriel finished, reaching across the table to take my hand. Everyone thought I was having a breakdown. My mom suggested therapy. Tyler sent me job listings for months. Dad just stopped talking about me altogether. Gabriel's expression darkened slightly. And they've never bothered to see what you've built? The programs you've developed? The kids you've helped? I shrugged. They see it as a hobby, not a career. Something I'm doing until I come to my senses. At last year's Christmas dinner, my father introduced me to his colleagues as Olivia, our daughter who's taking some time to give back before returning to law. I'd already been running Reachlit for a year at that point. Gabriel was quiet for a moment, a thoughtful expression on his face. You know, your brother's wedding is at the Hayes Memorial Library, right? That beautiful historic building downtown? Yes, I nodded. Apparently there was a last-minute cancellation, and they miraculously got it. Mom hasn't stopped talking about how exclusive it is, and how connected they must be to have secured it. Gabriel took a sip of his wine, a small smile playing at his lips. Did you know the Hayes Library renovation was funded by the Chen family educational foundation last year? My parents established it when I started Horizon. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I stared at him. Are you saying? The foundation maintains priority access for certain events. When you mentioned your brother was getting married, I may have asked my mother to put in a good word. My jaw dropped. Gabriel, they have no idea. They think it's all because of Tyler's fiancé's connections. He shrugged. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it mattered to you, even if they don't. That moment crystallized something for me. While my family had been dismissing my choices, I'd built a life filled with purpose and surrounded myself with people who valued what truly mattered. Gabriel wasn't just supportive of my work. He was actively involved, connecting me with resources, and amplifying Reachlet's impact whenever he could. As the wedding approached, I found myself increasingly anxious about introducing Gabriel to my family. Not because I worried they wouldn't like him, who wouldn't be impressed by a successful, thoughtful, handsome CEO, but because I dreaded the inevitable comparison. Once they knew who Gabriel was, the question would become even more pointed. With access to someone like him, why was I still choosing my modest nonprofit path? The day before we were set to fly to Seattle for the wedding, Gabriel came over as I was finishing my packing. He lounged on my bed, watching me fret over which dresses to bring. You know, you never asked me what I'm wearing to the ceremony, he said casually. I looked up from my suitcase. You're right. I just assumed you'd wear one of your impeccable suits. I was thinking the gray Tom Ford, the one I wore to the governor's education gala. I nodded, remembering how striking he'd looked that night. Perfect choice. And I had my assistant send over a few things for you, if you're interested. He nodded toward my front door. What things? I asked suspiciously. He smiled. Options. No pressure. But it might be fun to make an entrance that leaves them speechless. After he left that evening, I found a garment bag hanging on the back of my bedroom door. Inside was a stunning emerald green gown that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, along with a handwritten note, for a woman who changes lives every day. Whether you wear this or not, you'll be the most impressive person in the room. Gee. I ran my fingers over the luxurious fabric, conflicted. Part of me wanted to show up as exactly who I was, the nonprofit founder in her sensible cocktail dress. But another part, the part still nursing wounds from years of subtle dismissals, wanted to be seen differently, just once. The rehearsal dinner was the first time my family would meet Gabriel. I chose a simple black dress from my own closet, but wore the delicate emerald earrings that had been tucked into the pocket of the garment bag. When Gabriel picked me up at my hotel, he was the picture of understated elegance in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car. Ready for this? He asked, kissing my cheek. Not remotely, I admitted. But having you there will make it bearable. We arrived at the upscale restaurant my parents had chosen, and I immediately spotted my family at a large table in the private dining room. My mother was the first to notice us, her eyes widening slightly as she took in Gabriel's presence beside me. Olivia, darling, she called, rising to greet us with practiced warmth. And this must be Gabriel. How wonderful to meet you. My father and Tyler both stood as we approached, professional smiles firmly in place. Emma, Tyler's fiancé, gave me a genuine hug before shaking Gabriel's hand. Gabriel Chen, he introduced himself smoothly. Thank you for including me in your celebration. My father's handshake was firm, assessing. Richard Mercer. What was it Olivia said you do? Something in education? Educational technology, Gabriel replied easily. My company develops accessibility tools and learning platforms. Oh? Which company is that? My father asked, the question casual but probing. Horizon Dynamics, Gabriel said, just as a waiter arrived with champagne. I watched as recognition flickered across my father's face. Horizon Dynamics was hardly obscure. The company had been featured in Fortune and Forbes multiple times, and Gabriel had been on the cover of Business Week just last month. Horizon, you're that Gabriel Chen? My father's tone shifted from polite interest to keen attention in an instant. Gabriel simply nodded, his hand finding the small of my back. Olivia and I met at an education conference where she was speaking about her literacy initiative. Her insights on implementation in underserved communities have been invaluable to some of our recent projects. I could practically see my father recalculating everything he thought he knew about his disappointing daughter. My mother, ever the social strategist, immediately shifted into networking mode. How marvelous! We've always been so proud of Olivia's commitment to giving back, she said, as if she hadn't spent the past 2 years questioning my life choices. You simply must tell us more about your company. As we took our seats, I noticed Tyler studying, me with a new expression, something between surprise and curiosity. Emma leaned over to whisper, "You never mentioned your boyfriend was the Gabriel Chen. I used Horizon's platforms all through grad school." The dinner proceeded with a bizarre, new dynamic. Suddenly, my parents were deeply interested in ReachLit, asking questions they'd never bothered with before. My father even mentioned potential connections at his firm who might be interested in supporting my work, connections he could have offered at any point in the past 2 years. When the conversation turned to the wedding venue, my mother gushed, "We were so fortunate to secure the Hayes Library. Apparently, there was a last-minute cancellation, and Emma's family connections worked their magic." Gabriel caught my eye across the table, the smallest smile playing at his lips. "The Hayes is a beautiful space. I attended the reopening gala after its renovation last year." "Were you involved with the renovation project?" my father asked, clearly trying to make connections. "In a way," Gabriel replied vaguely. "My family's foundation supports various educational and cultural institutions." I took a sip of my champagne to hide my smile, watching my mother's eyes widen with dawning realization. The pieces were starting to come together for them, but not completely. Not yet. As the evening wore on, I observed the subtle shift in how my family interacted with me. There was a new deference, a reconsideration happening before my eyes. It wasn't that they suddenly valued my work. They valued my proximity to Gabriel's success. When dinner ended, Tyler pulled me aside as we waited for the valet to bring our cars around. "Liv, why didn't you tell us about him?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. I looked at my younger brother, really looked at him. Despite following my parents' prescribed path, Tyler had always been kinder than them, less judgmental of my choices. "Would it have changed how you all see what I do?" I asked quietly. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Maybe. I don't know. It's just, he's Gabriel Chen." "And you've been dating for months?" 8 months, I confirmed. "And I didn't tell you because I wanted to keep him separate from—" I gestured vaguely, encompassing our parents, the rehearsal dinner, the years of subtle disapproval. Tyler nodded slowly. "I get it. For what it's worth, I think what you're doing with ReachLit is cool. I've just never known how to say that with Mom and Dad around." It was a small crack in the facade, a tiny glimpse of genuine connection with my brother that I hadn't felt in years. As Gabriel and I drove back to the hotel, I felt emotionally exhausted, but somehow lighter. "Your family is exactly as you described them," Gabriel observed, his hand resting on mine as he drove. "They were on their best behavior tonight." I replied, "You haven't seen anything yet." He smiled. "I'm looking forward to tomorrow." "Are you?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Most people would be running in the opposite direction after meeting my parents." "I'm not most people," he reminded me. "And I think your family is about to realize that you aren't either." Back in my hotel room, I hung up the emerald gown Gabriel had given me, running my fingers over the fabric. For the first time, I found myself looking forward to the wedding, curious to see what would happen when all the cards were finally on the table. The morning of Tyler's wedding arrived with perfect blue skies over Seattle. I stood at my hotel window, watching the early sunlight reflect off the Puget Sound, feeling oddly calm about the day ahead. After trying on the emerald gown Gabriel had given me, I made my decision. I was done hiding, done diminishing myself to make others comfortable with their perception of me. Gabriel texted that he'd meet me at the ceremony rather than picking me up. Apparently, he had a few last-minute calls that couldn't wait. The tech world never really sleeps, especially when your company operates globally. I didn't mind the time to center myself before facing my family again. I arrived at the Hayes Memorial Library exactly when my mother had instructed, 2:30 p.m., a full hour before the ceremony. The historic building stood majestically against the Seattle skyline, its recently renovated facade gleaming in the afternoon sun. The thought that Gabriel's family foundation had made this venue possible without my family's knowledge still gave me a private thrill. As I entered through the grand doors, a young wedding coordinator immediately approached me. "You must be Olivia," she said with a smile. "Your mother described you perfectly. She's been asking when you'd arrive. They're taking family photos in the Athenaeum room upstairs." I thanked her and made my way up the marble staircase, the emerald gown flowing around me with each step. I'd chosen to wear my hair up, with the matching emerald earrings catching the light. It wasn't just about looking expensive, though the dress certainly was. It was about finally embracing my own worth without apology. When I entered the room, the photographer was arranging my parents and Tyler with his soon-to-be wife Emma. My mother spotted me first, her eyes widening. "Olivia!" she exclaimed, a bit too loudly. "That dress is unexpected." My father turned, his expression a mixture of surprise and immediate assessment, as if calculating the cost and what it implied. "You look beautiful, Liv," Tyler said, with genuine warmth, breaking the awkward moment. "Thank you," I replied, stepping forward to join the photos. "Let's get these done, shall we?" Through the photo session, I could feel my mother's gaze repeatedly returning to my dress, my jewelry, my overall appearance. This wasn't how she expected her struggling nonprofit daughter to present herself. I could practically see the questions forming behind her practiced smile. When the photographer finally released us, she pulled me aside, her voice low. "Darling, that dress is stunning. Is it?" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Is it something Gabriel gave you?" I met her eyes directly. Yes, it was a gift. He thought I might enjoy something special for Tyler's wedding. "How thoughtful," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "He must be doing quite well at that company of his." "Horizon Dynamics?" "Yes, he is," I replied simply, not elaborating. "Further." She waited expectantly, but when I offered nothing more, she changed tactics. "Will he be joining us soon?" "The ceremony starts in 40 minutes. He'll meet us here. He had some business to finish up." She nodded, disappointment flashing briefly across her face. I knew what she was thinking, that perhaps I'd exaggerated Gabriel's importance, that he might not show at all. She'd spent years believing the worst about my choices. Why would today be any different? As guests began to arrive and filter into the library's grand ballroom, I took a moment alone in a quiet alcove, texting Gabriel my location. He responded immediately. "Almost there. Can't wait to see you." Just before the ceremony was set to begin, my father appeared beside me, adjusting his cufflinks, a nervous habit I recognized from childhood. "Your mother said your friend might not make it," he said, emphasizing the word friend in a way that suggested skepticism. "He'll be here," I replied confidently. My father cleared his throat. "Olivia, I hope you know what you're doing. These tech types, they can be flighty. All that money, all those options. I wouldn't want to see you disappointed." I almost laughed at the irony, my father warning me about disappointment when he'd been serving it to me for years. "I appreciate your concern, Dad," I said, keeping my voice level. "But Gabriel isn't like that." He nodded, unconvinced. "Just remember, There's always a place for you at the firm if you're ready to get serious again. A few years off track doesn't have to define your whole career. Before I could respond, the wedding coordinator appeared, ushering everyone to their seats. The ceremony was about to begin. I checked my phone. No new messages from Gabriel. A flicker of worry passed through me, though I quickly dismissed it. He would be here. He had never let me down before. I took my assigned seat in the front row beside my mother, who leaned over to whisper, "Should we save a seat for Gabriel, or—" "Please do," I said firmly. The ceremony began with classical music filtering through the ballroom's perfect acoustics. Tyler stood at the front, handsome in his tuxedo, looking genuinely happy. Whatever my complicated feelings about my family, I loved my brother and was glad to see him finding joy. As Emma began her walk down the aisle, I discreetly checked my phone again. Still nothing from Gabriel. The first tendril of genuine worry curled through me. It wasn't like him to go silent, especially knowing how important today was. The ceremony proceeded beautifully. Vows were exchanged, rings were placed, promises were made. Throughout it all, I kept glancing toward the ballroom doors, expecting Gabriel to slip in quietly. But the doors remained closed. When Tyler and Emma were pronounced husband and wife, the guests erupted in applause. As they processed back down the aisle, my mother squeezed my hand, a rare gesture of affection that caught me by surprise. "I'm sorry your friend couldn't make it," she said, her voice a practiced blend of sympathy and vindication. "Men can be so unreliable." I pulled my hand away. "The ceremony just ended, Mom. The reception is still to come." She gave me a look that was almost pitying. "Of course, dear." The cocktail hour began in the library's magnificent atrium, with string lights twinkling overhead and champagne flowing freely. I circulated among extended family and my parents' friends, fielding the usual questions about my little charity project with practiced patience. Each time the atrium doors opened, my heart leapt, only to sink again when it wasn't Gabriel. Finally, I stepped outside onto one of the balconies for a moment of peace, dialing Gabriel's number. It went straight to voicemail. I sent another, "Sure, everything okay? Ceremony's over, reception starting soon." I was about to return inside when my phone buzzed. Gabriel's name appeared on the screen. "So sorry. Emergency board call ran long, then traffic. On my way now. 15 minutes. Relief washed over me, followed by a renewed sense of anticipation. The real moment was yet to come. When I rejoined the AIBA cocktail hour, my father approached with a colleague in tow. A silver-haired man with an expensive watch and the confident bearing of someone used to being listened to. "Olivia," my father said smoothly, "I wanted to introduce you to Harrison Wells. He's the managing partner at Wells & Barton. Harrison, this is my daughter." "A pleasure," Harrison said, shaking my hand. "Richard tells me you have a law background but have taken some time for philanthropic work. Very admirable." I smiled politely. "Thank you, though it's not temporary." ReachLit is a registered 501c3 nonprofit focused on literacy intervention in underserved communities. We're currently operating in 17 schools across Oregon. My father jumped in quickly. "Olivia has always had a charitable heart, but she's brilliant in the courtroom too, graduated top of her class." "Dad," I said, keeping my voice light but firm, "ReachLit isn't a hobby. We've secured sustainable funding for the next 3 years, and our programs have shown measurable improvement in reading proficiency scores across all our partner schools." Harrison looked intrigued. "That's impressive. How did you secure that? Kind of funding as a startup nonprofit? That's usually the biggest hurdle." Before I could answer, the reception doors opened, and the wedding coordinator announced that dinner would be served shortly. My father seized the opportunity to steer Harrison toward their table, effectively ending our conversation. As guests began moving toward the main reception hall, I checked my phone again. Another text from Gabriel. "Just arrived. Where are you?" I quickly replied with my location near the atrium entrance and scanned the crowd for him. When I finally spotted him walking through the main doors, my breath caught. Gabriel, in his bespoke gray suit, his confident stride, his warm eyes searching the room until they found mine. It struck me again how fortunate I was to have found someone who saw me so clearly. When our eyes met, his face lit up with a smile that made my heart race. He made his way through the crowd toward me, stopping occasionally as people recognized him and tried to engage him in conversation. Gabriel was too well known in tech circles to pass unnoticed, especially in a crowd like this one, filled with my parents' business connections. By the time he reached me, a subtle buzz of whispers had followed in his wake. I could see recognition dawning on various faces, including Harrison Wells, who was now watching our interaction with keen interest. "I'm so sorry I missed the ceremony," Gabriel said, taking both my hands in his and kissing my cheek. The Beijing team had an urgent security issue that needed immediate approval from the board. "It's okay," I assured him. "You're here now. That's what matters." He looked at me appreciatively, his eyes taking in the emerald gown. "You look absolutely stunning." "Well, someone has excellent taste in gifts," I replied with a smile. Gabriel kept his hand at the small of my back as we made our way into the reception hall. I could feel eyes following us, conversation quieting momentarily as we passed. My mother spotted us from across the room, her expression shifting from surprise to calculated pleasure as she hurried over. "Gabriel, you made it after all," she exclaimed, her social smile firmly in place. We were beginning to worry. "Mrs. Mercer," he greeted her warmly. "I apologize for missing the ceremony. International business sometimes has inconvenient timing." Of course," she said, waving away his apology. "What matters is that you're here now. We've saved you a seat at our table, right next to Olivia." As my mother led us to the family table, I noticed my father deep in conversation with two men I recognized as major donors to political campaigns and various civic initiatives. When he saw Gabriel, he excused himself immediately, making his way over with purposeful strides. "Mr. Chen," he said, extending his hand. "Richard Mercer. We met briefly last night. Glad you could join us." "The pleasure is mine," Gabriel replied, smoothly. "Your son's wedding is beautiful. The Haze is a magnificent venue." My father nodded in agreement. "We were fortunate to secure it. Apparently there was some last-minute opening in their schedule." Gabriel caught my eye with the smallest hint of a smile. "Sometimes timing works out perfectly." As dinner commenced, I watched my parents transform before my eyes. My mother, who had spent years dismissing my career choices, was now eagerly explaining to everyone at the table how I had always had a passion for educational equity and how proud they were of my work with Reachlit. My father, who had repeatedly suggested I was wasting my potential, now described my nonprofit as innovative and impactful to anyone who would listen. The most revealing moment came when the conversation turned to how Gabriel and I had met. My mother leaned in eagerly, clearly hoping for a story that would enhance the evening's social currency. "Gabriel approached me after my presentation at the National Education Innovation Conference," I explained. "I was discussing implementation challenges for literacy programs in under-resourced schools." Gabriel nodded. Olivia's approach to systematic barriers was more insightful than anything I'd heard from our own research team. I initially just wanted to pick her brain for our educational software division, but then I found myself asking her to coffee for reasons that had nothing to do with business. My father chuckled appreciatively. Always had an eye for talent, our Olivia. I nearly choked on my champagne at his revisionist history. Tyler caught my eye from across the table and gave me a subtle eye roll that made me feel, for the first time in years, like we were truly siblings again, united in our recognition of our parents' transparent behavior. As dinner plates were being cleared, the wedding coordinator approached our table and leaned down to speak quietly to my mother. "Mrs. Mercer, We have a small issue with the payment for the additional hour of reception time you requested. The system doesn't seem to be recognizing the credit card on file." My mother's face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Richard, could you step outside and sort this out?" My father frowned, clearly annoyed at being pulled away during such a prime networking opportunity, especially with Gabriel Chen at the table. Gabriel cleared his throat. "Please don't worry about it. I'm sure there's a simple solution." He pulled out his phone, typed briefly, then looked up at the coordinator. "Could you check again? The system should recognize the payment now." The coordinator stepped away to verify, returning moments later with a surprised expression. "Everything's been taken care of, Mrs. Mercer. Not just the additional hour, but the entire remaining balance for the reception." My mother looked confused. "The entire balance? But that's nearly $20,000 that was left to pay." Gabriel shrugged lightly. "Consider it our wedding gift to Tyler and Emma." The table fell silent. My father stared at Gabriel, then at me, mental calculations happening behind his eyes. "That's incredibly generous," he finally managed. "But we couldn't possibly—" "I insist," Gabriel said firmly. "Besides, it's the least we could do, considering." "Considering?" my mother echoed, curiosity piqued. Gabriel looked to me, a question in his eyes. I nodded slightly, giving him permission to continue. "The Chen Family Educational Foundation was the primary donor for the Hayes Library renovation last year," he explained. "As part of our agreement with the Hayes, the foundation maintains certain privileges regarding event bookings." He smiled at my parents. When Olivia mentioned her brother was getting married, I asked my mother, who chairs the foundation, if she might look into availability. The silence that followed was profound. My mother's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. My father's expression cycled rapidly between shock, disbelief, and the dawning recognition that they had severely misjudged their daughter's place in the world. "You're saying," my father began slowly, "the venue would have had a 3-year waiting list otherwise," Gabriel confirmed. "Olivia wanted Tyler's day to be special, but she preferred to keep our involvement quiet. She's never been one to seek recognition for her kindness." All eyes at the table turned to me. I took a sip of water, maintaining my composure while letting the truth settle around us. For years, I had been the family disappointment, the daughter who had strayed from the prescribed path. Now, suddenly, they were seeing me through a completely different lens and struggling to reconcile this reality with the narrative they had constructed. "Why didn't you tell us?" my mother finally asked, her voice small. I met her gaze steadily. "Would it have mattered? Would it have changed how you viewed my choices if you knew who I was dating, or that I had connections that could benefit the family?" She had no answer for that. The question hung in the air between us, uncomfortable in its honesty. Tyler broke the tension, raising his glass. "To Olivia and Gabriel, thank you for making our day so special. We had no idea." Everyone raised their glasses automatically, but I could see the calculations continuing behind my parents' eyes. This wasn't just about the venue or the money. This was about power dynamics that had shifted irrevocably in the space of a few sentences. As coffee and dessert were served, my father made his way to Gabriel's side, engaging him in conversation about Horizon Dynamics' recent expansion into Asian markets. My mother found her way to me, pulling me slightly aside with gentle pressure, on my elbow. "Olivia," she said, her voice pitched low, "why didn't you tell us about Gabriel, about his position, his family's foundation?" I looked at my mother, really looked at her, seeing beyond the perfect makeup and designer dress to the woman who had spent years subtly undermining my choices. "Because I didn't want you to value me differently based on who I was dating," I replied honestly. "I wanted you to respect my work on its own merits, not because of my connections." She flinched slightly. "We've always respected you, Olivia." "Have you?" I asked quietly. When was the last time you asked about Reachlit's programs without dismissing them as temporary? When did Dad ever introduce me to his colleagues as someone doing meaningful work rather than someone taking time off from real career advancement? My mother's gaze dropped to her hands. We only want what's best for you. No, I corrected gently. You want what's familiar to you. Those aren't the same thing. Before she could respond, the band announced the first dance for the newlyweds. Tyler and Emma moved to the center of the floor, swaying gracefully to a ballad they had chosen together. I watched my brother, happy, confident, glowing with love for his new wife, and felt a surge of genuine joy for him despite everything. Gabriel appeared at my side, his hand finding mine. Your brother looks happy, he observed. He does, I agreed. It's nice to see. When the dance floor opened to all guests, Gabriel led me out among the swirling couples. As we moved together, his hand warm against the small of my back, I felt some of the tension of the evening melting away. How are you holding up? He asked, his voice for my ears only. Better than expected, I admitted, though I think my parents are still processing. He smiled. They're watching us right now, you know. Your father hasn't taken his eyes off us since we started dancing. I resisted the urge to look. Probably trying to figure out how to pitch you investment opportunities or legal services. Gabriel chuckled. He already tried during dessert. I politely explained that Horizon has a very established legal team, one that specifically prioritizes corporate, social responsibility and ethical business practices. I smiled at that, imagining my father's reaction. The song transitioned to something slower, and Gabriel pulled me closer. You know, he said thoughtfully, your family's reaction tonight says nothing about your worth and everything about their limitations. I rested my head against his shoulder, grateful not just for his presence, but for his clarity. I know. I think I've always known. I just needed to stop waiting for them to see it too. As the evening progressed, I noticed a subtle shift in how the wedding guest interacted with me. People who had barely acknowledged me during the ceremony were now finding reasons to approach, to engage in conversation, to mention their own philanthropic interests. The emerald dress caught the light as I moved through the reception, but it wasn't the dress they were seeing differently. It was me. Near the end of the evening, as the celebration was winding down, Tyler found a moment to pull me aside. Liv, he said, his expression earnest. I had no idea about the venue, about Gabriel, about any of it. I know you didn't, I assured him. No, let me finish, he insisted. I should have known. Not about Gabriel specifically, but about you. About what you're capable of. About how significant your work is. I've been so caught up in following Dad's blueprint that I never stopped to really see what you were building. His sincerity caught me off guard. Tyler, it's your wedding day. You don't need to. I do need to, he interrupted. Because Dad and Mom might never say it directly, but I can. I'm sorry we've underestimated you all these years. I'm sorry we measured your success by standards that never made sense for who you are. Unexpected tears pricked at my eyes. Thank you, I said simply, squeezing his hand. He glanced over at Gabriel, who was engaged in conversation with Emma's father across the room. He seems like the real deal. I followed his gaze. He is. But that's not why I'm with him. I'd still be running Reachlit, still be committed to the same work, with or without Gabriel in my life. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. I believe you. I think that's what makes it all even more impressive. As he was called away for the cake cutting, my father approached, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. Olivia, he began, his voice more tentative than I'd ever heard it. Your mother and I have been talking. We'd like to make a donation to Reach Lit, a significant one. No strings attached. I studied him carefully. Why now, Dad? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. I could say it's because we've seen the value of your work more clearly tonight. but that wouldn't be entirely honest, would it? No, I agreed. It wouldn't. He sighed. The truth is, we've been wrong. I've been wrong. I measured success by the yardstick I understood: prestige, income, professional status. I never bothered to understand what you were building because it didn't fit my definition of achievement. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from my father. Thank you for acknowledging that, I said carefully. But I don't need your donation to validate my work. Reachlit is funded for the next 3 years. What I've always wanted isn't your money, it's your respect. He nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand that. Perhaps we could visit one of your programs sometime? See the work firsthand? It was a small olive branch, but a genuine one. I'd like that, I replied. As the evening drew to a close, Gabriel and I said our goodbyes to the newlyweds and prepared to leave. My mother caught me in a brief, awkward hug. Will you be at brunch tomorrow? She asked, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. We'll be there, I confirmed. Her relief was palpable. Good. That's good. As Gabriel and I walked out to the waiting car, the night air cool against my skin, I felt a weight lifting. Not completely, but noticeably. Years of accumulated judgment and dismissal couldn't be erased in a single evening. But something had shifted. A door had opened, even if just a crack. What are you thinking? Gabriel asked as we settled into the back seat of the car. I leaned against him, considering the question. I'm thinking that tonight wasn't about proving them wrong or making them see my worth. No? He prompted, curious. No, I said with certainty. It was about finally, fully recognizing it myself, regardless of whether they ever did. He smiled, pressing a kiss to my temple. That's why I love you, Olivia Mercer. You've always known your worth. You just needed to stop apologizing for it. As we drove away from the Hayes Library, the building illuminated against the night sky. I thought about the path that had led me here. Every choice I had made, walking away from law, starting Reachlit, building a life true to my values, had been right for me, regardless of my family's approval. The emerald dress caught the passing streetlights, throwing green reflections across the car's interior. Tonight, I had allowed myself to be fully seen, not just by my family, but by myself. And in that visibility, I had found not validation, but liberation. The morning after Tyler's wedding dawned gray and misty, typical Seattle weather that seemed to be making up for yesterday's perfect sunshine. I awoke in Gabriel's arms in our hotel suite, memories of the previous night washing over me in waves. The revelation about the venue, my parents' shocked expressions, the subtle but unmistakable shift in how everyone at the wedding suddenly viewed me. Gabriel stirred beside me, his eyes opening slowly. Good morning, he murmured, pulling me closer. How are you feeling about everything? I considered the question, watching raindrops trace patterns on the floor-to-ceiling windows. Strangely calm, I admitted, like something that was wound too tight for too long has finally been released. He nodded, understanding as always. The brunch is at 11? Yes, I confirmed. At the hotel restaurant. One last opportunity for my parents to process everything that happened last night. Gabriel kissed my forehead. Then we have plenty of time to ourselves first. We lingered in bed, in no rush to face the outside world. This quiet moment together felt like a sanctuary after the emotional intensity of the previous evening. Gabriel's phone buzzed occasionally with work messages. Running a global tech company meant he was never truly off the clock. But he ignored them, focused entirely on our conversation, on the comfortable silence we shared. Around 10, we finally began getting ready for the post-wedding brunch. I chose a simple blue dress from my own wardrobe this time, wanting to present myself authentically. The emerald gown had made its statement. Today was about navigating the aftermath. Ready for round 2? Gabriel asked as we prepared to leave our room. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, smoothing my dress. At least there are fewer witnesses today. The hotel restaurant had been reserved for the wedding party and close family, about 30 people in total. When we arrived, I immediately spotted my parents seated with Tyler and Emma, their heads close together in conversation. My mother noticed us first, straightening in her chair and nudging my father, who turned to track our approach. "Olivia, Gabriel," my mother greeted us, her voice overly bright. "We were just discussing last night. What a wonderful celebration, wasn't it?" "It was beautiful," I agreed, kissing Tyler's cheek and hugging Emma. "You two look happy, if a bit tired." Emma laughed. "We didn't get much sleep. Too excited about leaving for our honeymoon this afternoon." "Where are you headed again?" Gabriel asked as we took our seats. "Italy," Tyler replied. 2 weeks touring Florence, Rome, and the Amalfi Coast. My father cleared his throat. "Gabriel, I wanted to thank you again for your generosity last night. The gesture was unexpected but very much appreciated." Gabriel smiled easily. "It was nothing. Friends of Olivia's are friends of mine." I caught the subtle emphasis in his eye. Words, friends of Olivia's, not an obligation to her family. The distinction wasn't lost on my father, whose expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Well," my mother interjected smoothly, "we're delighted to welcome you to our extended circle. I must say, Gabriel, you've certainly been a revelation." The waiter arrived to take our orders, providing a momentary reprieve from the underlying tension. Once he'd gone, my father turned his attention to me. "Olivia, your mother and I have been thinking. We'd like to host a small dinner next month when you and Gabriel are back in Seattle. Nothing formal, just family and a few close friends. To properly introduce Gabriel to our circle." I exchanged a quick glance with Gabriel before responding. "That's thoughtful, Dad, but we're both quite busy. Gabriel's schedule especially is planned months in advance." Of course, my father said hastily. "Whenever works for you. We're flexible." The eagerness in his voice was so transparent, it was almost painful. This was the same man who, for 2 years, had barely acknowledged my career choice, who had dismissed my work as a temporary detour from the path he'd planned for me. Now he was practically falling over himself to accommodate us. "I'll check my calendar and let you—" "No," I said neutrally. My mother reached across the table to pat my hand. "We're just so thrilled to finally get to know Gabriel properly and to learn more about your work together. It sounds fascinating." "We don't work together directly," I clarified. "Reach Lit and Horizon Dynamics are separate entities with different missions." "But surely there's overlap," she pressed, "with your educational focus and Gabriel's technology." Gabriel smoothly stepped in. "Olivia has been adamant about maintaining Reachlit's independence. She refused any preferential investment from Horizon or my family's foundation. Everything she's built on the strength of her own vision and hard work." My parents exchanged a look that spoke volumes: surprise, reassessment, and perhaps the first genuine flicker of respect. "That's admirable," my father said slowly, as if trying the concept on for size. The conversation shifted to Tyler and Emma's honeymoon plans, giving me a moment to breathe. Under the table, Gabriel squeezed my hand, a silent gesture of support that meant more than he could know. As brunch progressed, I observed the subtle dance happening around us. My parents trying to rewrite history in real time. Tyler and Emma genuinely happy, but also clearly processing the revelations about me, about Gabriel, about our role in securing their perfect wedding venue. Various relatives and wedding party members stealing glances at our table, curiosity evident in their expressions. When the meal ended, Tyler and Emma had to leave to prepare for their flight. As we said our goodbyes, Emma hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." I had no idea. I hugged her back. Be happy. That's all the thanks I need. Tyler's embrace was different somehow, less perfunctory than usual, with an emotional weight I hadn't felt from him in years. We'll talk when I get back, he said quietly. Really talk. It's long overdue. I nodded, a lump in my throat. I'd like that. As they departed, my parents approached Gabriel and me, their body language carefully calibrated to appear casual despite the obvious agenda. We were hoping to speak with you privately before you leave, my father said. Perhaps in the hotel lounge? I glanced at Gabriel, who nodded almost imperceptibly. We have a little time, I conceded. The hotel lounge was quiet, with plush seating arranged in intimate groupings that afforded privacy. My parents selected a corner arrangement, away from other guests, and we settled into the soft armchairs, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us until my father finally spoke. Olivia, he began, his tone uncharacteristically hesitant. Your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking since last night. About you, about Reachlit, about the way we've approached your career choices. I waited, not offering any easy absolution. He continued, choosing his words carefully. I think it's fair to say we've been operating under some misconceptions. We saw your decision to leave the firm as impulsive, possibly even self-sabotaging. We didn't understand the vision you had for your nonprofit work. You never asked, I pointed out quietly. You assumed. You judged. My mother flinched slightly. That's fair. We did. And that was wrong of us. May I ask a question? Gabriel interjected, his tone respectful but firm. Both my parents turned to him expectantly. What changed? Was it learning about my position? My company? The foundation's role in the wedding venue? My father shifted uncomfortably. I won't deny those revelations were illuminating. But they also forced us to confront our own biases. We've been measuring Olivia's success by a very narrow standard, one that clearly doesn't apply to the path she's chosen. And one that shouldn't matter even if it did, my mother added, surprising me. The truth is, seeing how you value Olivia, for exactly who she is, made us realize how much we've been trying to reshape her into something she was never meant to be. I studied my mother's face, searching for insincerity, but finding none. I've never needed your approval to know my work matters, I said finally. The children we help, the schools where literacy rates have improved, that's the validation that counts. We understand that now, my father said. Or we're trying to. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. What we're asking for is the chance to start again, to get to know the person you actually are, not the person we kept insisting. You should be. I felt Gabriel's steady presence beside me, a silent pillar of support as I navigated this unexpected terrain. I'd be open to that, I said carefully. But it has to be genuine, not because you're impressed by Gabriel or his connections. That's fair, my mother acknowledged. More than fair, given how we've behaved. My father reached into his jacket and withdrew a folded check, placing it on the coffee table between us. We'd like to make a donation to Reachlit. No strings attached, no board positions requested, no visibility required. Just a gesture of support for work we should have been championing all along. I glanced at the check without picking it up. The amount was substantial, enough to fund an entire new program site. Why now? I asked. My father held my gaze steadily. Because I was wrong. Because I want to be part of building something meaningful, even if it doesn't look like what I expected. Because you're my daughter, and it's time I started acting like your father. The simplicity of his answer, stripped of the usual legal precision and careful phrasing, caught me off guard. For the first time in years, I glimpsed the man behind the tailored suits and calculated career moves. The father who had taught me to ride a bike, who had once promised to always be in my corner. I'll accept this for Reachlit, I said finally, picking up the check. But understand that it doesn't fix everything between us. That will take time and consistent effort. We know, my mother said softly. We're prepared for that. As we wrapped up the conversation and prepared to leave, my father asked Gabriel about Horizon's upcoming projects, showing what seemed like genuine interest. My mother touched my arm lightly as we stood. I've always been proud of you, Olivia, she said quietly. Even when I didn't understand your choices, I just didn't know how to show it in a way that mattered. You could have tried asking questions instead of making assumptions, I suggested, not unkindly. You still can. She nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I'd like that. Very much. We said our goodbyes in the hotel lobby, the awkwardness of the previous day replaced by something tentative but potentially genuine. As Gabriel and I walked toward the elevator to collect our luggage, he slipped his arm around my waist. What are you thinking? He asked. I'm thinking people are complicated, I replied. And that change is rarely as dramatic as last night might suggest. This is just a beginning. He nodded. A promising one, though. Maybe, I conceded. We'll see. Back in our suite, as we packed our belongings for the flight back to Portland, Gabriel received a call from his assistant. I half listened to his side of the conversation, something about a potential partnership in Europe that needed his immediate attention. When he hung up, his expression was apologetic. I need to fly to London tonight, he explained. The Lexford Group is considering a major investment in our accessibility tools division, but they want to meet in person before committing. That's important, I acknowledged. You should go. I'd rather stay with you, he said, pulling me close. Especially after everything that happened this weekend. I rested my head against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. This weekend was clarifying. He tilted my chin up, studying my face. Come with me to London. We could extend it, make it a proper trip. Paris, maybe Rome afterward? The invitation was tempting. A week or two away from everything, exploring Europe with Gabriel, putting physical distance between myself and the emotional complexity of the past 24 hours. But something inside me resisted. I can't, I said gently. We're launching a new program site next week. The team needs me there. Instead of disappointment, I saw pride flash in Gabriel's eyes. Of course, the children come first. Rain check on Paris? I suggested. Absolutely, he agreed, kissing me softly. Whenever you're ready. We traveled together to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, where Gabriel would catch his direct flight to London while I boarded a much shorter one back to Portland. As we waited in the first-class lounge, my phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Made it to the airport. Thanks again for everything. I mean it. When I get back, let's really talk. I showed Gabriel the message. Progress, he observed. Small steps, but in the right direction. That seems to be the theme of the weekend, I replied. When it was time for Gabriel to board, he held me close, reluctant to let go. Call me when you land? Even if it's the middle of the night in London? I will, I promised. Go charm the Lexford Group. Those accessibility tools could help millions. He smiled, running his thumb along my cheek. That's what I love about you, Olivia Mercer, always seeing the bigger picture. After Gabriel departed, I found a quiet corner of the lounge to wait for my own flight. I pulled out my tablet, opening the draft proposal for our next literacy initiative, an expansion into rural communities where resources were even scarcer than in urban schools. The work grounded me, redirecting my focus from family drama to the mission that had become my life's purpose. My phone buzzed with an incoming email from my mother. The subject line read simply, "A start." I hesitated before opening it. "Olivia, it began. "I've been reflecting on our conversation this morning. You said I should ask questions instead of making assumptions. So here's my first question. Would you be willing to show me what Reachlit does? Not for any publicity or social capital, but because I want to understand what matters to you. Your father and I could come to Portland, or wherever would be least disruptive to your work. Just think about it. With love, Mom." I stared at the screen, emotions conflicting within me. Skepticism warred with hope, caution with the desire to believe this represented genuine change. I drafted several responses before settling on a simple 1. "We're opening a new program site next Tuesday at Jefferson Elementary in North Portland, 10 a.m. If you're serious about understanding, that would be a good place to start." I hit send before I could overthink it, then returned to my proposal. Whatever happened with my parents, whether this was the beginning of real change or just a temporary adjustment based on new information, I knew my path forward. Reachlit was making a difference. The children we served were finding their voices through literacy. That was what mattered, regardless of who understood or approved. My flight to Portland was called, and I gathered my belongings, a sense of clarity and purpose settling over me. The weekend had been transformative in ways I hadn't anticipated, but the most important realization had little to do with my parents' validation or Gabriel's status. It was the understanding that I had built something meaningful entirely on my own terms, something that wasn't defined by my family's expectations or even by my relationship with Gabriel. Reachlit was mine. My vision, my passion, my contribution to a world that desperately needed more bridges and fewer barriers. As the plane lifted off, carrying me back to the life I had chosen, I felt lighter somehow. Not because everything was resolved, far from it, but because I no longer needed it to be. My worth wasn't contingent on my parents' approval or anyone else's understanding. It never had been. The flight to Portland was quick, just under an hour in the air. As we descended through cloud cover, the familiar green landscape of Oregon came into view, the city nestled between mountains and river. Home, in every sense that mattered. I took a rideshare from the airport to my apartment, the driver chatting amiably about the weekend's unusually nice weather. My building was a converted warehouse in the Pearl District, nothing like the luxury high-rises Gabriel owned in several cities, but perfect for me, open and airy, with large windows and exposed brick walls that I'd filled with bookshelves. As I unlocked my door, the familiar scent of old books and the lavender essential oil I used in my diffuser welcomed me home. I dropped my bags by the door and moved immediately to my desk by the window, where I could see the sunset painting, the sky in shades of pink and gold. I texted Gabriel to let him know I'd arrived safely, though his plane was likely still over the Atlantic. Then I opened my laptop and dove back into work, reviewing the final details for Tuesday's program launch. Time slipped away as I refined logistics, approved materials, and coordinated with the school principal via email. Around 9, my doorbell rang, unexpected at this hour. I approached cautiously, checking the peephole to find Lisa, Reachlit's program director, standing in the hallway with 2 pizza boxes and a determined expression. "I knew you'd be working instead of eating," she said when I opened the door, pushing past me with the ease of long friendship. So I brought sustenance and updates. Lisa had been with Reachlit from the beginning, a former elementary school teacher with 20 years of experience and a passion for literacy that matched my own. She was practical where I was visionary, detailed where I was big picture, and together we made an effective team. "You didn't have to do that," I protested, even as my stomach growled at the smell of pizza. "Clearly I did," she replied, setting the boxes on my kitchen counter. "You look exhausted. How was the wedding?" I hesitated, unsure how to summarize the emotional complexity of the weekend. "It was revelatory," I said finally. Lisa raised an eyebrow, pulling plates from my cabinet with the familiarity of someone who had spent countless evenings strategizing over takeout. That sounds either very good or very bad. Both? Neither? I shrugged, accepting the plate. She handed me. My parents found out who Gabriel really is. It changed things. Of course it did, Lisa said matter-of-factly. People like your parents only understand success when it comes with status and money. That's what I thought too, I admitted. But there might be more to it. They want to come to the Jefferson launch on Tuesday. Lisa nearly dropped her pizza. Your parents? The ones who call Reachlit your little project? Those parents? I nodded, taking a bite to avoid elaborating further. Well, she said after a moment, I'll make sure we have extra chairs. And I'll tell Marcos to have his financial reports ready. Your father will want to see the numbers. I smiled gratefully. Lisa understood without needing the details. She'd heard enough about my family over the years to grasp the significance of their sudden interest. How are the volunteers for Tuesday? I asked, deliberately changing the subject. We spent the next hour reviewing preparations for the launch, the conversation flowing easily into familiar professional territory. By the time Lisa left, I felt grounded again, reconnected to the work that defined me far more than any family, dynamics, or romantic relationship. Before bed, I checked my phone to find a message from Gabriel, who had landed safely in London. Missing you already. The Lexford meeting is tomorrow afternoon. Wish me luck. And remember, I'm still collecting. On that rain check for Paris. Love you. I smiled, typing back. Good luck tomorrow. The children of the world need those accessibility tools. And yes to Paris. Someday when Reachlit can spare me. Love you too. As I prepared for sleep, my phone buzzed once more. A text from my mother. We'll be there on Tuesday. Your father has rearranged his entire schedule. Thank you for the opportunity. I stared at the message, not quite ready to fully trust this new version of my parents, but willing to leave the door open. See you then, I replied simply. Monday passed in a blur of preparation. The Reachlit team gathered at our modest office, renovated storefront in Northeast Portland, to finalize materials for the Jefferson Elementary launch. Our program combined targeted literacy intervention with access to diverse, engaging books that reflected the lives and experiences of the children we served. Each new site required careful customization based on the specific needs of that school community. By the time I returned to my apartment that evening, I was physically exhausted but mentally invigorated. This was the work I was meant to do. The work that had called me away from a prestigious law career despite my family's disapproval. Every time we opened a new program site, I felt that certainty reaffirm itself. I spoke with Gabriel briefly, catching him just as he was heading into his meeting with the Lexford group. He sounded confident and focused, fully in his element. We kept the conversation short but connected, two people pursuing our separate passions while supporting each other completely. You're going to be amazing tomorrow, he told me before hanging up. Those kids don't know how lucky they are to have you fighting for them. His words stayed with me as I laid out my clothes for the next day. Professional but approachable, nothing like the emerald gown from the wedding, but nothing that downplayed my competence either. I chose a simple navy dress with a structured blazer, comfortable enough to move around in while reading to children, but polished enough for the small press contingent that would be covering the launch. I tried not to focus on the fact that my parents would be there, observing this part of my life for the first time with newly opened eyes. Their presence was secondary to the purpose of the day, welcoming another school into the Reachlit family, putting books into the hands of children who needed them, training teachers in our methodology, and beginning the work that would help struggling readers find confidence and joy in literacy. Tuesday morning arrived with gentle spring rain, the kind that nourished rather than dampened spirits. I arrived at Jefferson Elementary at 8, 2 hours before the official launch, to ensure everything was perfectly prepared. The library had been transformed with Reachlit's colorful signage, freshly stocked bookshelves, and comfortable reading nooks. Volunteer readers were being briefed in one corner, while Lisa supervised the arrangement of refreshments in another. "The superintendent's office called," Lisa informed me, clipboard in hand. "He's sending the district literacy coordinator as well, and the mayor's education liaison confirmed she'll be here." I nodded, mentally adjusting my welcome remarks to acknowledge the additional officials. "Any word from the press?" "The Oregonian and 2 local stations," she confirmed. "Plus the neighborhood paper and a few education bloggers. Pretty good turnout." "Perfect," I said, surveying the space with satisfaction. "Let's make sure the children get priority seating. They're why we're here, after all." By 9:30, the library was humming with activity. Teachers led their classes in for the special assembly, children's eyes widening at the transformation of their familiar space. I moved among them, introducing myself, asking their names, watching their faces light up when I explained they would each get to choose books to take home. At 9:45, Lisa appeared at my elbow. "Your parents are here," she said quietly. "They're early." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Where are they?" "Main entrance. The principal is greeting them now." I made my way through the library and down the main hallway, spotting my parents immediately. They looked both perfectly in place and completely out of context. My father in a tailored suit that probably cost more than most teachers' monthly salaries. My mother in a conservative dress and pearl necklace. But what struck me most was their body language. Tentative, almost uncertain. So different from their usual confident stance in social situations. "Mom, Dad," I greeted them, approaching with professional composure. "Thank you for coming." "Olivia," my mother said, her eyes taking in my appearance with what looked like genuine appreciation. "This is quite an operation you have here." My father nodded, glancing around at the school hallway with its student artwork and motivational posters. "Very impressive. The principal was just telling us about the impact your program has had at other schools." "We're excited to bring it to Jefferson," I said, motioning for them to follow me. "The launch ceremony will begin in about 15 minutes, but I can give you a quick tour of the library first if you'd like." "We'd love that," my mother said quickly, falling into step beside me. As I led them through the school, explaining Reachlit's methodology and showing them the carefully curated book collections, I watched their expressions shift from polite interest to genuine engagement. My father asked surprisingly thoughtful questions about assessment metrics and sustainability models. My mother knelt down to admire a display of diverse picture books, commenting on the beautiful illustrations. "The children get to take these home?" she asked, clearly surprised. "Yes," I confirmed. "Book ownership is a critical component of our program. Many of these children don't have books at home. We want to change that." "That's..." She paused, seeming to search for the right words. "That's transformative, Olivia. Truly." Before I could respond, a small voice interrupted us. "Miss Olivia, are you the book lady?" I turned to find a young girl, maybe 7 years old, looking up at me with curious eyes. I knelt down to her level, smiling. "I am. And who are you?" "Zoe," she replied. "My teacher said you're bringing us books that we get to keep forever and ever." "That's right," I told her. "Would you like to help me choose some for your classmates?" She nodded eagerly, then looked shyly at my parents. "Are they book people too?" I glanced up at my parents, suddenly seeing them through Zoe's eyes, tall, well-dressed strangers in her school. "This is my mom and dad," I explained. "They came to see our book celebration today." To my surprise, my father knelt down as well, extending his hand to Zoe with the same respect he would show a business associate. "It's very nice to meet you, Zoe. I hear you're getting some special books today." Zoe nodded solemnly, shaking his hand. "Reading is important. That's what Miss Olivia says, but I'm not very good at it yet." "Well," my father said gently, "everyone starts somewhere. and you have an excellent teacher in my daughter." The simple pride in his voice caught me off guard. Zoe beamed at us both before hurrying back to join her class, who were being seated in the library. As we straightened up, my father cleared his throat. "You're doing important work here, Olivia," he said quietly. "I see that now." Something shifted between us in that moment. A small but significant realignment. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. A glimpse of what might be possible if we both continued trying. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means more than you know." The launch ceremony began right on schedule, with the principal welcoming everyone before introducing me as the founder and executive director of Reach Lit. As I stepped up to the microphone, I caught sight of my parents standing at the back of the room, watching with expressions I had rarely seen directed at me. Attentiveness, respect, and something that looked remarkably like pride. I put them out of my mind and focused on the children seated cross-legged on the colorful carpet before me. They were why I was here. They were why Reach Lit existed. They were the reason I had walked away from the path my parents had planned for me, toward one that aligned with my own values and vision. "Today," I began, looking out at those eager young faces, "we're celebrating the magic of books and the power of reading." In that moment, surrounded by the children we served, supported by the team we'd built, and finally, perhaps, understood by the family who had once dismissed my choices, I felt a profound sense of alignment. This was success on my own terms. This was the life I had chosen, deliberately and wholeheartedly. And it was more than enough. 6 months after Tyler's wedding, I stood at the window of Gabriel's penthouse in downtown Portland, watching autumn rain transform the city into a watercolor painting of amber streetlights and blurred reflections. Behind me, Gabriel was on the phone discussing final details for tomorrow's announcement, the official partnership between Reach Lit and the Chen Family Educational Foundation that would expand our literacy programs to 50 more schools across 3 states. So much had changed since that revelatory weekend in Seattle. Reach Lit had grown from a promising local nonprofit into a regional force in education, with dedicated staff in Portland, Seattle, and now San Francisco. The Jefferson Elementary launch had been just the beginning, a catalyst that sparked interest from educational leaders throughout the Pacific Northwest. Gabriel ended his call and joined me at the window, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind. "The press release is approved. Your team made some excellent revisions." I leaned back against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "Are you sure about the funding model? Your foundation has never committed to a 5-year guaranteed partnership before." "I'm more than sure," he murmured, his lips against my hair. "The data from your pilot program speaks for itself. Literacy rates improved by 23% in under a year. What you've built deserves to grow." I turned in his arms to face him, my hands resting on his chest. "I just want to be certain that everyone understands this partnership isn't because of our personal relationship." The board approval was unanimous based on Reach Lit's metrics alone. Gabriel's eyes held mine, understanding my concern completely. "No one who has seen your work could possibly think otherwise. This partnership was earned, not given." The anxiety that had been building in me relaxed slightly at his words. Since Tyler's wedding, I'd been vigilant about maintaining the clear separation between my professional accomplishments and my relationship with Gabriel. Reach Lit's success had to stand on its own merits, not on perceptions of privilege or connection. "Speaking of relationships," Gabriel said, changing the subject. As he guided me toward the couch, "Have you decided about Thanksgiving?" I sighed, curling into the corner of the plush sofa. "My mother has called 3 times this week to confirm we're coming. She's already planning the menu and seating arrangements." Gabriel sat beside me, his expression carefully neutral. "And how do you feel about that?" It was a complex question. In the months since Tyler's wedding, my relationship with my parents had undergone a cautious transformation. After their visit to the Jefferson Elementary launch, they had made consistent, if sometimes awkward, efforts to understand and support my work. My father had introduced me to several potential donors without attempting to control the narrative. My mother had volunteered at 2 Reachlit events, genuinely engaging with the children and teachers. "I think they're trying," I said finally. "Really trying. Not just because of you or what they think you represent, but because they've actually started to see me." "Then I think we should go," Gabriel replied simply. "Besides, I've never experienced a traditional American Thanksgiving. My parents always traveled internationally during the holiday breaks." I smiled at the thought of Gabriel experiencing my mother's meticulous holiday planning and my father's ceremonial carving of the turkey. It won't be perfect. There will be moments of tension, old patterns trying to reassert themselves. "Life rarely offers perfect," Gabriel said, lacing his fingers through mine. "But it does offer growth, and that's what I've seen happening. With your family." I nodded, acknowledging the truth in his words. The relationship with my parents was evolving, not into some idealized fantasy of total understanding, but into something more honest and balanced than before. They were learning to respect my choices rather than merely tolerating them until I came to my senses. "There's something else we need to discuss before tomorrow's announcement," Gabriel said, his tone shifting slightly. I raised an eyebrow, curious about the sudden change in his demeanor. "What is it?" He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box, setting it on the coffee table between us. "This isn't how I planned to do this. I had an elaborate scenario involving the rooftop garden and string lights, and that chocolate soufflé you love from Lucian's." My breath caught as I stared at the box, understanding dawning. "Gabriel." "But then I realized," he continued, his voice steady despite the emotion I could see in his eyes, "that what matters isn't the setting or the timing. It's the question itself and the life it represents." He opened the box to reveal a stunning emerald ring, not an ostentatious diamond, but a deep green stone that seemed to capture the essence of forests and oceans in its depths. "I chose an emerald because diamonds seemed too expected," he explained, a hint of nervousness breaking through his usual confidence. "And because that night at the wedding, in that green dress, you were the most authentic version of yourself I'd ever seen. Not because of the dress itself, but because you were finally allowing everyone to see the extraordinary woman I already knew." I stared at the ring, emotions swirling through me like autumn leaves in a windstorm. Gabriel took my hands in his, drawing my gaze up to meet his. "Olivia Mercer, I don't want to be just your boyfriend or partner. I want to build a life with you, a life where we each pursue our separate passions while creating something meaningful together. Will you marry me?" The question hung in the air between us, simple yet profound in its implications. I thought about the journey that had brought us here, from that first meeting at the education conference to this moment of perfect clarity. I thought about how Gabriel had never tried to change me or shape me into someone more convenient or comprehensible. He had simply seen me, valued me, and loved me for exactly who I was. "Yes," I whispered, feeling tears spring to my eyes. "Absolutely, yes." His face broke into a smile of such genuine joy that it took my breath away. He slipped the ring onto my finger, a perfect fit, of course, and then pulled me into his arms, his kiss conveying everything words couldn't capture. When we finally separated, I looked down at the emerald gleaming on my hand. "It's beautiful. Perfect, actually." "There's something else," Gabriel said, a hint of mischief in his tone. "Something I've been working on separately from the foundation. Partnership." "What is it?" I asked, intrigued by his expression. Horizon Dynamics is launching a new educational publishing division focused exclusively on diverse, accessible children's literature, the kind of books Reachlit has been advocating for. We'll be producing them at cost for nonprofits and underserved schools. I stared at him, understanding the significance of this announcement. Gabriel, that's going to change everything. The biggest barrier we face is the cost of quality, diverse books. He nodded, clearly pleased by my reaction. The division will operate independently, with its own board that includes educators and diversity experts. I want to be clear that this isn't about controlling Reachlit's resources or influencing your independence. It's about addressing a need in the market that aligns with both our missions. It's brilliant, I said with genuine admiration, and incredibly thoughtful. There's one more thing, he added, reaching for his tablet on the coffee table. I'd like you to see the name we've chosen for the division. He pulled up a sleek logo design that read, Mercer Books, Opening Worlds Through Words. You're naming it after me? I asked, stunned by the gesture. Gabriel shook his head. Not exactly. I'm naming it after the teacher who inspired you to become a reader. Your grandmother, Elizabeth Mercer. You told me once that she would read to you for hours, bringing stories to life with different voices and endless patience. That she showed you how books could be windows into other worlds and mirrors reflecting your own experience. I felt tears spring to my eyes again. My grandmother had been a public school teacher for 40 years in a small Oregon town, touching countless lives with her dedication to literacy and learning. She had died during my second year of law school, never seeing me leave the firm to start Reachlit, but somehow I'd always felt she would have understood and approved of my choice. She would have loved this, I said softly. All of it, Reachlit, the partnership, this new publishing division. It honors her legacy in the most perfect way. Gabriel squeezed my hand. I thought so too. The first books will be published next spring, in time for the new school year. We spent the rest of the evening discussing details of both announcements, the conversation flowing easily between personal and professional topics. As always, Gabriel understood and respected the boundaries between Reachlit's mission and Horizon's initiatives, ensuring that our partnership remained ethical and transparent. Later that night, as we prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Mom just called with the news. Congratulations, sis. Gabriel finally made an honest woman of you. Her words, definitely not mine. Seriously, though, I'm thrilled for you both. You deserve all the happiness in the world. I smiled, showing the message to Gabriel. My mother works fast. I only called her an hour ago. I suspect she's already planning our wedding, he replied with a chuckle. Based on my limited exposure to Diana Mercer, I imagine she has a venue and color scheme in mind already. Probably, I agreed, though she might be surprised by what we actually choose. Gabriel pulled me close. And what might that be, future Mrs. Mercer Chen? Something meaningful, I said thoughtfully. Something that reflects who we are and what we value, not what tradition or expectation dictates. Like everything else in our relationship, he observed. Exactly like that. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the rain giving way to crisp autumn sunshine that gilded the changing leaves. I dressed carefully for the press conference, selecting a professional, emerald green blazer that complemented my new ring. Gabriel wore his standard press appearance attire, impeccably tailored gray suit, subtle Horizon Dynamics pin on his lapel. Nervous? He asked, as our car pulled up to the Portland Central Library, where the announcement would take place. A little, I admitted. This partnership changes everything for Reachlit. The spotlight will be much brighter now. You've earned it, he said simply. And you're ready for it. The library's main hall had been transformed for the event, with rows of chairs for press and invited guests, a podium emblazoned with both the Reachlit and Chen Foundation logos, and displays showcasing the impact of literacy programs in underserved communities. Lisa met us at the side entrance, clipboard in hand as always, her expression a mixture of excitement and professional composure. "Everything's set," she reported. "Full house. We've got education reporters from all the major outlets, school superintendents from 3 districts, and the governor's education policy advisor just arrived." "What about—" I began, scanning the gathering crowd. "Your parents are here," Lisa confirmed before I could finish. "Front row, left side. They arrived 20 minutes early." I nodded, grateful for her efficiency and understanding. "And the presentation?" "Loaded and tested. The children from Jefferson Elementary are ready for their reading demonstration after your remarks." Gabriel excused himself to take a call from his executive team, leaving me a moment with Lisa. She glanced down at my left hand, spotting the emerald ring immediately. "So it finally happened," she said with a warm smile. I was wondering when he'd ask. "Congratulations, Olivia." "Thank you," I replied, still getting used to the weight of the ring on my finger. "It feels right. Timing-wise, I mean." Lisa nodded, understanding as always. "Because you've secured Reachlet's future on your own terms first. The partnership is based on merit, not personal connection." "Exactly. For what it's worth," she added, her voice softening. "Everyone who matters knows that. Your work speaks for itself." Before I could respond, the event coordinator approached to let us know it was time to begin. I took a deep breath, centering myself for the presentation ahead. As I moved toward the main hall, I caught sight of my parents seated exactly where Lisa had indicated. My mother was wearing a deep blue dress I'd never seen before, her posture perfect as always, but her expression softer somehow. My father sat beside her, his attention focused on the Reachlit impact report he was reading rather than on the networking opportunities around him. When they spotted me, both smiled with what appeared to be genuine pride. My mother mouthed, "Congratulations," while gesturing subtly to her own ring finger. I smiled back, acknowledging their presence and support without letting it define the moment. This was about Reachlit's achievement, not family dynamics. The press conference began with introductions from the library director, followed by a short video highlighting Reachlit's impact over the past 2 years. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the podium with the confidence that comes from absolute belief in your purpose. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, looking out at the assembled crowd of educators, reporters, and community leaders. 2 years ago, Reachlit began with a simple but powerful belief. Literacy is not a privilege but a right, and every child deserves access to books that both mirror their experiences and open windows to new worlds. I outlined our growth from a single program site to 17 schools across Oregon, sharing stories of children whose reading skills and confidence had flourished. I explained our methodology, our commitment to data-driven interventions, and our vision for the future. Today, I'm honored to announce a landmark partnership between Reachlit and the Chen Family Educational Foundation that will allow us to expand our programs to 50 additional schools in Oregon, Washington, and Northern California over the next 3 years. Applause rippled through the audience as I detailed the scope of the partnership, the funding structure, accountability metrics, and anticipated impact. Throughout my presentation, I made sure to emphasize that the Foundation's decision had been based on Reachlit's proven outcomes and alignment with their educational mission. When I finished, Gabriel took the podium to explain the Foundation's perspective and to make his own announcement about Mercer Books. Watching him speak about the publishing initiative with such passion and clarity, I felt a surge of pride and gratitude. He had created something meaningful that complemented Reachlit's work without overshadowing or controlling it, a perfect embodiment of our personal and professional dynamic. After the formal presentations, we invited a group of third graders from Jefferson Elementary to demonstrate a Reachlit reading session. The children, initially shy in front of the cameras but quickly engaged by the books and activities, stole the show completely. Their enthusiasm and improved reading skills provided living proof of the program's impact in a way that statistics and speeches never could. As the press conference transitioned to a more informal reception, I found myself surrounded by well-wishers and interested supporters. School administrators who had been hesitant about adopting Reachlet's programs now approached eagerly to discuss implementation timelines. Reporters requested in-depth interviews about our methodology and expansion plans. Through it all, I maintained the careful balance I'd cultivated, passionate about our mission but grounded in data, visionary about possibilities but realistic about challenges. This was the professional identity I had built, separate from both my family name and my relationship with Gabriel. During a brief lull in conversations, my parents approached, my father extending his hand to Gabriel while my mother embraced me warmly. "We are so proud of you, Olivia," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "What you've built here is extraordinary, and the engagement, we couldn't be happier." My father, never one for effusive displays, simply said, "Well done. Both announcements are significant achievements." Coming from him, it was high praise. Indeed. I thanked them both, appreciating their support without needing or expecting more. Our relationship had found a new equilibrium. Not perfect, still occasionally strained by old patterns, but fundamentally more honest than before. "The Thanksgiving invitation still stands," my mother added, "though I imagine you'll be quite busy with all these new developments." "We'll be there," I assured her. Gabriel has never experienced a proper Mercer family Thanksgiving. My father chuckled. "It'll be an education, certainly." As they moved away to speak with some acquaintances, Gabriel rejoined me, slipping his arm around my waist. "How are you holding up?" "Surprisingly well," I replied. "It feels like everything is aligning. Reachlet's growth, our engagement, even my relationship with my parents. Not perfect, but purposeful." He nodded, understanding as always. That's the best kind of alignment, the kind that acknowledges complexity rather than demanding perfection. The reception continued around us, a celebration of possibility and promise. As I surveyed the room, educators engaged in animated conversations about literacy, children proudly showing off their reading skills to impressed adults, my team fielding questions with confidence and expertise, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This was the path I had chosen despite my family's initial disapproval and skepticism. This was the work that fulfilled me, that aligned with my deepest values. And Gabriel, standing beside me not as a savior or validator, but as a true partner, who respected my independence while offering genuine support, was the person I had chosen to share my life with. Later that evening, after the last interviews were completed and the final details arranged, Gabriel and I returned to his penthouse, both exhilarated and exhausted by the day's events. As we relaxed on the balcony with glasses of wine, watching the city lights emerge against the darkening sky, he turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you," he said, "about the wedding." "What about it?" I asked, curious about his pensive tone. "I know your parents will have expectations, probably involving a society page announcement and hundreds of guests." He paused, gauging my reaction. "But I want whatever you want. If that means a small ceremony on a mountaintop with just our closest friends or eloping to Paris or anything in between, I'm all in." I considered his words, appreciating once again how completely he understood me. "Actually, I've been thinking about that. What would you think about getting married?" "At Jefferson Elementary?" "In the library where we launched our partnership." His expression shifted from surprise to delight. "The school library? Really?" I nodded, warming to the idea as I articulated it. We could invite the children from the program, make it a celebration of literacy and learning as well as our commitment to each other. It wouldn't be traditional, but it would be perfectly us, he finished. "I love it. Completely and absolutely. My mother will be horrified, I said with a small laugh. She's probably already contacted the Four Seasons. Gabriel grinned. We'll win her over. We'll create a compromise that honors what matters to us while respecting family traditions where it makes sense. Balance in all things, I agreed. That seems to be our theme. We fell into comfortable silence, the city humming with life. Below us, the future stretching out before us with all its complexity and promise. 6 months ago, at Tyler's wedding, a moment of revelation had changed how my family saw me. But the real transformation had nothing to do with their perception and everything to do with my own certainty, my unwavering commitment to the path I'd chosen. "What are you thinking about?" Gabriel asked, noticing my contemplative expression. I turned to him. This remarkable man who had seen my worth long before my family recognized it, who had supported my independence rather than trying to shape me into something more conventional or convenient. "I'm thinking about how sometimes the most powerful moment isn't when others finally see your value," I said softly. "It's when you stop needing them to." He nodded, understanding immediately as he always did. And yet there's something beautiful about when they finally do. Not because it validates you, but because it means they've grown too. Exactly. I raised my glass to his. To growth, to purpose, to choosing our own path. And to finding someone who walks it with you, he added, his eyes reflecting the city lights and something deeper, something that belonged only to us. As our glasses clinked together, I felt the weight of the emerald ring on my finger, not as a symbol of status or validation, but as a tangible reminder of a love built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Whatever came next, the expanded programs, the wedding, the inevitable complications and challenges, we would face it together, on our own terms. The path I had chosen, the one my family had once dismissed as a temporary detour from real success, had led me exactly where I was meant to be. Not to Gabriel's wealth or status, but to a life aligned with my deepest values. To work that made a difference. To love that amplified rather than diminished my sense of self. And in that alignment, I had found something far more valuable than approval or acknowledgement. I had found home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.